now the fucking timer just goes off. Okay, I see how this is. Also, thank you for subscribing, pack of wasabi beans. I'm not sure if you're watching right now because this is so embarrassing. Oh, so embarrassing. I am. Oh, okay. My lord. Hello, everybody. Good morning. You know what? To rectify this, I am holding now a cup of. I'm holding now a cup of water. So not water. I was gonna say I am holding a cup of tea right now, just to rectify the whole sleeping thing. Okay, there we go. Oh, warm tea. Sorry, you know what happens when sometimes you lie down on something really soft and then you can doze off? Yeah, that kind of happened to me this afternoon. So, not this afternoon, it's been happening to me like the last few days. And before I get ahead of myself, welcome everybody to the reading stream. Today we're covering like the last of War of the Worlds, as you can see right here. This is the exact cover of the book we're doing. If you're new to the stream, War of the Worlds is a science fiction book written by H.G. Wells in 1896. I don't remember what the book was written. Let me just check it up. Oh my goodness, my brain is no longer working. I think it's like what, 1895? Yeah, I think 1895 around here. So yes, we're gonna be finishing up War of the Worlds. As we can see from the last time, we stopped at chapter 5, which is the stillness, and we are now in book 2. So yes, I have nothing to say except I'm actually quite interested in seeing how the story ends, and I bet you guys are as well. So I think the last time the curate is dead. So the tripod had killed the curate, and our friend the narrator has avoided the wrath of the tripod, and for that, well, we're kind of happy he survives because otherwise you can't tell the story. And in these last 5 chapters, I guess we're gonna see the last days of the Martian invasion, or I don't know. I don't even know if it's considered spoiling a story, because this story has been around for like a long time. So if you have not been to my reading streams before, here are the basic rules. Look up here, boys. Look up. If you can't read, then let me know. So it's like I will read the selected story uninterrupted for a chapter. I'll take a 5-minute break after I finish each chapter, and then after that, that's it. And with 40 pages, we might actually be done really quick. So let's just see how this goes. And before I go on, I like to expand a bit on a slight thing that's been happening to me recently. And yeah, I think the thing I wanted to address, right, I couldn't get it out of my head, but I have now a sleeping problem. I don't know how to explain it. Nowadays I find it very easy to fall asleep when it's very warm or very cold, and because the bed is meant for sleeping, I always lie down, and then like the next 5-10 minutes I'll always find myself falling asleep. So this has been happening to me quite recently. Actually, you know what, I'm wearing a jacket right now, so give me a second, I will return. Okay, there you go. I'm wearing a jacket, so I gotta represent myself in real life. So yes, recently I have been noticing that in real life I've been developing this very constant sleep problem, and I don't know whether you guys have experienced this before, because this is very indicative of something happening in my life, because I don't know what it means. And I'll try my best to rectify. Yeah, yeah, it's like hibernation season. It's like I want to sleep all day, and I've been seeing all the Twitter posts about like people sleeping and whatnot. I don't actually have a sleeping problem at night, because as you guys know, even though I stay up late, right, I've been dedicated to trying to make my sleeping schedules around either 12 to 1. The latest I'll sleep nowadays is 2. Back then I could binge until like 4 or 3 with a bunch of friends, but now with my grooming classes, and next week and tomorrow's the last one, so I can go back to my regular schedule. My stream my sleeping schedule has been gone back to 12 to 1, and preparation for my internship as well. So I'm not so sure where the sleeping thing is coming from. So what I can theorize is that I'm either getting incredibly demotivated with stuff, not streaming in general, because I think streaming I'm doing perfectly fine. It's just that when it comes to life in general, maybe it's just me feeling a bit demotivated. But I won't bother you guys too much with this detail because a lot of the problems that come up in life you deal with yourself. So this I'm just telling you guys right now. And if you have a similar issue, I hope you kind of get over it. And yeah. I don't even know what the thing is. I will try and handle this myself, and if there's anything going on, I'll let you guys know, because I don't think this is too serious. It's just something I've been developing. So yes, I will not delay this anymore. Give me a second. Yeah, okay. Yeah, the system noises just came up. Okay, let me just turn off the chatting music. All right. As I said, we're going to be reading War of the Worlds. Another sip of tea. This is Lipton. Was it Lipton? No, this is not Shamon. What the hell am I drinking? Ooh, this is good. Oh, this is bitter, real bitter. Okay. All right, we're gonna finish up this book, and then after that we can discuss whether we want to go on to the last. Oh, so I forgot my clock is not on. Oh my god, I am so sloppy today. Don't look at the clock, guys. The clock has always been working. Okay, all right, let's go on. Where are my? That is my vocal warm up. People like to sing as vocal warm ups. I just do that. Okay. Whew. Right, we're now at chapter 5 of book 2, The Stillness. Nice clock, bro. Artie, you can't just say that. Bonk, bonk like this. Bonk. Okay, so chapter 5, The Stillness. My first act before I went into the pantry was to fasten the door between the kitchen and the scullery. But the pantry was empty. Every scrap of food had gone. Apparently the Martian had taken it all on the previous day. At that discovery, I despaired for the first time. I took no food or no drink either. On the 11th of the 12th day. At first my mouth and throat were parched, and my strength ebbed sensibly. I sat about in the darkness of the scullery in a state of despondent wretchedness. My mind ran on eating. I had thought I had become deaf, for the noises of movement I had been accustomed to hear from the pit had ceased absolutely. I did not feel strong enough to crawl noiselessly into the peephole, or I would have gone there. On the 12th day, my throat was so painful that, taking the chance of alarming the Martians, I attacked the creaking rainwater pump that stood by the sink and got a couple of glassfuls of blackened and tainted rainwater. I was greatly refreshed by this, and emboldened by the fact that no incurring tentacle followed the noise of my pumping. During these days, in a rambling, inconclusive way, I thought much of the curate and of the manner of his death. On the 13th day, I drank some more water, and dozed and thought disjointedly of eatings and of vague, impossible plans of escape. Whenever I dozed, I dreamt of horrible phantasms, of the death of the curate, or of sumptuous dinners. But, asleep or awake, I felt a keen pain that urged me to drink again and again. The light that came into the scullery was no longer grey, but red. To my disordered imagination, it seemed the color of blood. Welcome, newbie. Yes. On the 14th day, I went into the kitchen, and I was surprised to find that the fronds of the red weed had grown right across the hole in the wall, turning the half-light of the place into a crimson-colored obscurity. It was early on the 15th day that I heard a curious, familiar sequence of sounds in the kitchen, and listening, identified it as the snuffing and scratching of a dog. Going into the kitchen, I saw a dog's nose peering in through the break among the ruddy fronds. This greatly surprised me. At the scent of me, he barked shortly. I thought if I could induce him to come into the place quietly, I should be able, perhaps, to kill and eat him? What the hell? and in any case, it would be advisable to kill him, lest his actions attracted the attention of the Martians. I crept forward, saying, "Good dog! Good dog?" very softly, but he suddenly withdrew his head and disappeared. I listened. I was not deaf, but suddenly the pit was still. I heard a sound like the flutter of a bird's wing and a horse crooking, but that was all. For a long while I lay close to the peephole, but not daring to move aside the red plants that obscured it. Once or twice I heard a faint pitter-patter like the feet of the dog going hither and thither on the sand far below me, and there were more bird-like sounds, but that was all. At length, encouraged by the silence, I looked out. Except in the corner where a multitude of crows hopped and fought over the skeletons of the dead the Martians had consumed, there was not a living thing in the pit. I stared about me, scarcely believing my eyes. All the machinery had gone, save for a big mound of grayish-blue powder in one corner, certain bars of aluminium in another, the black birds, and the skeleton of the killed. The place was merely an empty circular pit in the sand. Slowly, I thrust myself out through the red weed and stood upon the mound of rubble. I could see in any direction save behind me, to the north, and neither Martians nor sign of Martians were to be seen. The pit dropped sheerly from my feet, but a little way along the rubbish afforded a practicable slope to the summit of the ruins. My chance of escape had come. I began to tremble. I hesitated for some time, and then, in a gust of desperate resolution, and with a heart that throbbed violently, I scrambled to the top of the mound in which I had been buried so long. I looked about again. To the northward, too, no Martian was visible. When I had last seen this part of Sheen in the daylight, it had been a straggling street of comfortable white and red houses, interspersed with abundant shady trees. Now I stood on a mound of smashed brickwood, clay and gravel, over which spread a multitude of red cactus-shaped plants, knee-high, without a solitary terrestrial growth to dispute their footing. The trees near me were dead and brown, but further a network of red threads scaled the still living stems. The neighboring houses had all been wrecked, but none had been burned. Their walls stood, sometimes to the second story, with smashed windows and shattered doors. The red wheat grew tumultuously in the roofless rooms. Below me was the great pit, with the crows struggling for its refuse. Below, a number of other birds hopped about among the ruins. Far away, I saw a gaunt cat slink crouchingly along a wall, but traces of men there were none. The day seemed, by contrast with my recent confinement, dazzling bright, and the sky a glowing blue. A gentle breeze kept the red weed that covered every scrap of unoccupied ground gently swing. And oh, the sweetness of the air. So this marks the end of chapter 5. What a very short chapter. And well, in that time of reading, I guess you can kind of see that the Martians are gone. And also, cue the what the dog doing. Dog was most likely trying to look for food. Anyway, welcome newbie and Adibucha. Welcome to the reading stream. Sorry if the music is slightly too loud. We're now continuing into book 2 and finishing up War of the Worlds today. So yeah, this could actually be a really short stream. So I don't know. So personally, I like this kind of scenario because it reminds me a lot of the post-apocalyptic scenes that you see in movies, where out of all the things that come, humans are gone, but you can always see wildlife return, or at least some kind of wildlife returning. So this kind of scene builds on this aura, even though, right, it's not that time where post-apocalyptic stuff is exactly common. Okay, my throat is just not this. My throat's not agreeing with me today. So imagine, if you will, the scene in a movie like I Am Legend, or the aftermath of the supposed radiation leak in Godzilla, the new Godzilla in 2014. It kind of reminds me of that. Like, not a lot of time has passed, but humans are gone, And what I like is that this scene actually, as much as it has calmed down, right, it allows you to picture this very abandoned place. There's no trees overgrowing anything. The place has been destroyed. No Martians or okay, someone just entered the room. It was the dog. So there are no Martians or no humans about anymore, right? So wildlife has come back. Wildlife has come back to scavenge what was left of the invaders, basically. And for me, I think that's quite interesting about this chapter, more intriguing than the human drama, because immediately this is a book written in close to the 1900s, so I'm not so sure what the authors thought about the world after man. So this description of, you know, a post Martian sheen is actually quite interesting, and in that way it feels very, I wouldn't say this is a, I guess this is a chapter that kind of tells you, oh yes, he's finally gotten out of the runes, right? But also, is it 5 minutes? Yeah, you know what, 5 minutes, that means we'll continue reading back at either 4 or 4:03. Okay, so the nice part is that not only does it tell you that he's escaped, he's found his opportunity to escape, but the starkness of it actually, because at one point there was a dog sniffing about, and like Artie said, what the dog doing, as it goes around in the narrator's mind. And because he's hungry, the first thought he has was to eat the dog. You can kind of hear my reactions then. It's like, why would you eat the dog? Why would you eat the dog? That's kind of scary though, bruh. Okay, my clock has seemed to start working again. What is going on? So yeah, basically there's one part where it just highlights the desperation of the narrator, and in that simple short sentences it can tell you that to kill the dog, it means that he's hungry and he doesn't want the Martians' attention, and he has gone to that point of barbarism that he has to resort to thinking like this. It's the survival of the fittest. There is no more civilization at this point, even though the damage seems to be quite localized to London. Yeah, it points out the starkness of the situation. And interestingly, the Martian is also a hoarder and took the food. I have no idea what that was for, but I guess that was just maybe either the Curie eating everything before getting murdered, or just the or just some animals scrounging around. In his fear of hiding in his fear of the Martians, he just hides in the basement, and then there's some animal that he didn't hear that just ate everything. So yeah. Hakase, welcome to the stream. I am so sorry, the stream is like supposed to be at 3 o'clock, but yeah, I kinda overslept, so I really apologize. If how are you, Hakase? We're taking a 5 minutes break, and I believe in 2 minutes we can just go back to reading chapter 6, which I can see here is the work of 15 days. So yes, we were just discussing about the context of the last chapter, and yeah, I pointed out how interesting it is just to see the world without man and alien for the brief moment of time, because I'm pretty sure man would come back or the aliens would come back, and in that time you can already see animals coming back to clean up what was left, the bones, the rubble, what could be left of the book. I'm fine, and also you looks like a grandpa. Is it because of the shades, young man? It's because of the shades, and because of the fact that I'm reading you a bedtime story where everyone just dies gruesomely. I mean, I drew this myself, so I kind of understand. I'm going for that parenting vibe without like actually parenting vibe. Okay, we got 10 more seconds. Okay. So yes, I will discuss a bit more about things I want to read in the future after all this is done. So yes, probably hold a poll. Plus, this is the last stream of the week, so. All right. Oh, that was bad. That was a bad burp. Bad burp. I'm alert for the story while work. Okay, no problem. Though you might be lost in case something's come out, because we progressed very far. Like we're near the finale of the story already. Book 2 is about wrapping things up, so you might get lost. In case you do that, if anyone gets lost, you guys can just look up the reading stream or find a copy of the book online. I can try and find a book online and provide it for you all. So yes. Oh my god, I keep getting KFC stuff. Alright, no more delay. Let's see here. We're at chapter 6 of book 2, The Work of 15 Days. For some time I stood tottering on the mound regardless of my safety. Within that noisome den from which I had emerged, I had thought with a narrow intensity only of our immediate security. Okay, so I also do something where I look up a word that's, you know, not very familiar to me. So this word noisome, it seems to be very archaic, or at least just a very old word that doesn't really get used now. So noisome, for everybody's convenience, is having an extremely offensive smell, or very unpleasant or disagreeable. It's a adjective basically, and from the word I felt like it was describing a noise. So yes, so what he meant was there was an unpleasant den from which you emerged from, which is a apt description. Right, let's continue. I had not realized that what had been happening to the world. Hey Shark, welcome to the stream. Okay, I had not realized what had been happening to the world. Had not anticipated this startling vision of unfamiliar things. I had expected to see sheen-in ruins. I found about me the landscape weird and lurid of another planet. For that moment I touched an emotion beyond the common range of men, yet one that the poor brutes we dominate know only too well. I felt as a rabbit might feel returning to his burrow and suddenly confronted by the work of a dozen busy navvies digging the foundations of a house. I felt the first inkling of a thing that presently grew quite clear in my mind, that oppressed me for many days. A sense of dethronement, a persuasion that I was no longer a master, but an animal among the animals, under the Martian heel. With us it would be as with them, to lurk and watch, to run and hide. The fear and empire of man had passed away. But so soon as this strangeness had been realized, it passed, and my dominant motive became the hunger of my long and dismal fast. In the direction away from the pit I saw, beyond a red-covered wall, a patch of garden ground unburied. This gave me a hint, and I went knee-deep, and sometimes neck-deep, in the red weed. The density of the weed gave me a reassuring sense of hiding. The wall was some 6 feet high, and when I attempted to clamber it, I found I could not lift my feet to the crest. So I went along by the side of it, and came to a corner and a rockwood that enabled me to get to the top and tumble into the garden I coveted. Here I found some young onions, a couple of gladiolus bulbs, and a quantity of immature carrots, all of which I secured, and, scrambling over a ruined wall, went on my way through scarlet and crimson trees towards Q. It was like walking through an avenue of giant blood drops, possessed with two ideas: to get more food, and to limp as far as my strength permitted out of this accursed unearthly region of the pit. Some way further, in a grassy place, was a group of mushrooms which also I devoured, and then I came upon a broad sheet of flowing shallow water where meadows used to be. These fragments of nourishment served only to whet my hunger. At first I was surprised at this flood in a hot, dry summer, but afterwards I discovered that it was caused by the tropical exuberance of the red weed. Directly this extraordinary growth encountered water, it straightway became gigantic and of unparalleled fecundity. Its seeds were simply poured down into the water of the Wey and the Thames, and its swiftly growing and titanic waterfront speedily choked both those rivers. At Putney, as I afterwards saw, the bridge was almost lost in the tangle of this weed, and at Richmond too, the Thames waters poured in a broad and shallow stream across the meadows of Hampton and Twickenham. As the waters spread, the weed followed them, until the ruined villas of the Thames valley were for a time lost in this red swamp, whose margin I explored, and much to the desolation the Martians had caused was concealed. In the end, the red weed succumbed almost as quickly as it had spread. a cankering disease due, it is believed, to the actions of certain bacteria presently seized upon it. Now, by the action of natural selection, all terrestrial plants have acquired a resisting power against bacterial diseases. They never succumb without a severe struggle, but the red wheat rotted like a thing already dead. The fronds became bleached and then shriveled and brittle. They broke off at the least touch, and the waters that had stimulated their early growth carried their last vestiges out to sea. My first act on coming to this water was, of course, to slake my thirst. I drank a great deal of it, and moved by an impulse, gnawed on some fronds of red wheat, but they were watery and had a sickly metallic taste. I found the water was sufficiently shallow for me to wade securely, although the red wheat impeded my feet a little. But the flood evidently got deeper towards the river, and I turned back to Mortlake. I managed to make out the road by means of occasional ruins of its villas and fences and lamps, and so presently I got out of this spate and made my way to the hill going up towards Roehampton and came out on Putney Common. Here the scenery changed from the strange and unfamiliar to the wreckage of the familiar. Patches of ground exhibited the devastation of a cyclone, and in a few score yards I would come upon perfectly undisturbed spaces, houses with their blinds trimly drawn and doors closed, as if they had been left for a day by the owners, or as if their owners slept within. The red wheat was less abundant. The tall trees along the lane were free from the red creeper. I hunted for food among the trees, finding nothing, and I also raided a couple of silent houses, but they already had been broken into and ransacked. I rested for the remainder of the day in a shrubbery, being, in my enfeebled condition, too fatigued to pushing on. All this time I saw no human beings, and no signs of the Martians. I encountered a couple of hungry-looking dogs, but both hurried circuitously away from the advances I made them. Near Roehampton I had seen 2 human skeletons, not bodies, but skeletons, picked clean, and in the wood by me I found the crushed and scattered bones of several cats and rabbits, and the skull of a sheep. But though I gnawed part of these in my mouth, there was nothing to be got from them. After sunset, I struggled on along the road towards Putney, where I think the heat ray must have been used for some reason. And in a garden beyond Roehampton, I got a quantity of immature potatoes, sufficient to stay my hunger. From this garden, one looked down upon Putney and the river. The aspect of the place in the dusk was singularly desolate. Blackened trees, blackened, desolate ruins, and down the hills the sheet of the flooded river, red tinged with the reed, and over all, silence. It filled me with indescribable terror to think how swiftly that desolating change had come. For a time I believed that mankind had been swept out of existence, and that I stood there alone, the last man alive. Hard by the top of Putney Hill I came upon another skeleton, with the arms dislocated and removed several yards from the rest of the body. As I proceeded, I became more and more convinced that the extermination of mankind was, save for such stragglers as myself, had already accomplished in this part of the world. The Martians, I thought, had gone on and left the country desolated, seeking food elsewhere. Perhaps even now they were destroying Berlin or Paris, or it might be they had gone northward. And this marks the end of chapter 6. Oh, hello, Paco Wasabi Bean. Thank you for subscribing earlier on when I was getting ready to stream. How are you? So as you can see, the tone of this chapter is quite desolate. So we're going to be continuing reading at 17. Okay. So as you can see, the theme of book 2 is a very post-apocalyptic. It's less of a war novel, I guess. Now I would consider War of the Worlds a sort of science fiction-y war novel with aliens that quickly descends into post-apocalypticness. So as you can see here, the entirety of at least the stretches of Britain that the narrator has traveled has become uninhabitable to humans. So basically, you get to see wild mongrels running about and skeletons everywhere, left by the Martians in vaporizing everybody or drinking their blood. And the suitably despondent responses of the narrator is actually quite interesting, in the vein that it reminds me of Mary Shelley's The Last Man. Now, this is a work that I think most of you probably all of you will not know. But The Last Man also, let me just look this up because I've never read this book properly. So let me see. The Last Man, Mary Shelley. So Mary Shelley's The Last Man is a similar book that takes place, was first published in 1826, and very coincidentally enough talks about the after effects of a mysterious pandemic that sweeps across the entire globe. So well, you can see it as a kind of prophecy, but since The Last Man is mostly I don't know how you say, The Last Man is, as the title implies, just a guy trying to survive in the plague. So it reminds me of the setting of this book, because although the plague is not present in this book, you can quite clearly tell to the Martians it's happening, or at least to what the Martian biology is not prepared for. Their biology is not prepared for Earth, and the red weeds dying to the bacteria becomes an important plot point later on. So yes. So, and the visuals that is inspired, the imagery that is inspired by H.G. Wells's words here is suitably quite empty. There's no one around for like miles. So in these last few chapters, with the curate gone, all that the narrator sees of humanity, besides the broken architecture, is just the skeletons of the dead men and women that have been caught in the attacks by the tripods. So it probably does contribute to an idea that this guy is literally the last man standing in Britain. Yet at the same time, you can kind of tell this is not exactly true, because in the houses that we just recently read and saw, it seems to be well preserved. Like the Martians didn't actually go near them. So in a way, you can chalk it up to his personal trauma clouding what could be possible humans going around. And with the Martians gone, he doesn't know. He is scared. So in a situation like this, where you're in what is clearly enemy territory, you're obviously bound to be scared. And in this case, the narrator feels it, and he feels, sorry. As readers, we can extrapolate that he is feeling this sense of paranoia. He is scrounging around. He's a survivalist, and he is desperate enough that in the chapter before this, he contemplated eating a dog simply because, one, it could give away his position, and two, he was hungry, very hungry. So, as much as, like, to give you a bit of context, right? Victorian era London, or at least the society that was Britain before the 1900s and before the advent of the First World War, was a lot more formal and civilized, and just a lot more formal in general. And this kind of behavior is very odd, reserved for the mentally ill. And now that you see it happening, you see a civilized man like the narrator falling into ruin and despair, into the state of scavenging survival. It's a very interesting and what could be a very shocking point to the readers at the time, because now there are places in the world we are exposed to where we can actually see this happening. So yeah, it doesn't seem too alien to us. Plus, we've been exposed to post-apocalyptic media like Fallout and Mad Max, in which there are people who act like scavengers and are suitably like scavengers. This at this time is hitherto unknown of, because War of the Worlds, right, is about alien invasion. Because first of all, alien invasion is highly impractical, probably will not happen in our lifetimes, even in this modern age. But that post-apocalypticness is a very It's a very stark reminder that in the outbreak of war or anything like that, we will all fall to our baser instincts. And yeah, I can expand a bit more about this after I read the chapter, because it also ties into a discussion about the character who just died by the name of the curate. So yes, let's move on to the next chapter. I apologize if I'm starting to ramble. The roof of my mouth is a bit painful. Okay, I'm starting to get to like the bottom of the tea. I can taste it like really bitter. In the meantime, how are you doing, Wasabi Beans? How are you guys doing in general, basically? I hope you guys have been doing fine this Friday, because last few days have been quite hot for me, or it's just very, very unpredictable, so yeah. Alright. Fine Dayo. Okay. That's good, Shark. You're gonna get pat from me. Pat pat. Always happy to see you around on my streams. Also, alright. Chapter 7. The Man on Putney Hill. I spent that night in the inn that stands at the top of Putney Hill, sleeping in a made bed for the first time since my flight to Leatherhead. I will not tell the needless trouble I had breaking into that house. Afterwards, I found the front door was on a latch. Nor how I ransacked every room for food, until, just on the verge of despair, in what seemed to me to be a servant's bedroom, I found a rag-gnawed crust and 2 tins of pineapple. The place had already been searched and emptied. In the bar, I afterwards found some biscuits and sandwiches that had been overlooked. The latter I could not eat, they were too rotten. But the former not only stayed my hunger, but filled my pockets. I lit no lamps, fearing some Martian might come beating that part of London for food in the night. Before I went to bed, I had an interval of restlessness, and prowled from window to window, peering out for some sign of these monsters. I slept little. As I lay in the bed, I found myself thinking consecutively, a thing I do not remember to have done since my last argument with the curate. During all the intervening time, my mental condition had been a hurrying succession of vague emotional states, or a sort of stupid receptivity. But in the night, my brain, reinforced, I suppose, by the food I had written, grew clear again, and I thought. 3 things struggled for possession of my mind: the killing of the curate, the whereabouts of the Martians, and the possible fate of my wife. The former gave me no sensation or horror or remorse to recall. I saw it simply as a thing done, a memory infinitely disagreeable but quite without the quality of remorse. I saw myself then as I see myself now, driven step by step towards that hasty blow, the creature of a sequence of accidents leading inevitably to that. I felt no condemnation, yet the memory, static, unprogressive, haunted me. In the silence of the night, with that sense of the nearness of God that sometimes comes into the stillness and darkness, I stood my trial, my only trial, for that moment of wrath and fear. I retraced every step of our conversation from the moment when I had found him crouching beside me, heedless of my thirst, and pointing to the fire and smoke that streamed out from the ruins of Weybridge. We had been incapable of cooperation. Grim chance had taken no heed of that. Had I foreseen, I should have left him at Halliford. But I did not foresee, and crime is to foresee and do. And I set this down as I set all this story down, as it was. There was no witnesses. All these things I might have concealed, but I set it down, and the reader must form his judgment as he will. And when, by an effort, I had set aside that picture of a prostrate body, I faced the problem of the Martians and the fate of my wife. For the former I had no data. I could imagine 100 things, and so, unhappily, I could for the latter. And suddenly that night became terrible. I found myself sitting up in bed, staring at the dark. I found myself praying that the heat ray might have suddenly and painlessly struck her out of her being. Since the night on my return from Leatherhead, I had not prayed. I had uttered prayers, fetish prayers, had prayed as Hiddens muttered charms when I was in extremity. But now I prayed indeed, pleading steadfastly and sanely, face to face with the darkness of God. Strange night! Strangers in this, that so soon as dawn had come, I, who had talked to God, crept out of the house like a rat leaving its hiding place. A creature scarcely larger, an inferior animal, a thing that for any passing whim of our masters might be hunted and killed. Perhaps they also prayed confidently to God. Surely, if we have learnt nothing else, this war has taught us pity. Pity for those witless souls that suffer our dominion. The morning was bright and fine, and the eastern sky glowed pink, and was fretted by little golden clouds. In the road that runs from the top of Putney Hill to Wimbledon was a number of poor vestiges of the panic torrent that must have poured Londonward on the Sunday night after the fighting began. There was a little two-wheeled cart inscribed with the name of Thomas Lobb, greengrocer, New Malden, with a smashed wheel and an abandoned tin trunk. There was a straw hat trampled into the now hardened mud, and at the top of the West Hill a lot of blood-stained glass about the overturned water trough. My movements were languid, my plans of the vaguest. I had an idea of going to Leatherhead, though I knew that there I had the poorest chance of finding my wife. Certainly, unless death had overtaken them suddenly, my cousins and she would have fled thence. But it seemed to me I might find or learn there whither the Surrey people had fled. I knew I wanted to find my wife, that my heart ached for her and the world of men. But I had no clear idea how the finding might be done. I was also sharply aware now of my intense loneliness. From the corner I went, under cover of a thicket of trees and bushes, to the edge of Wimbledon Common, stretching wide and far. That dark expanse was lit in patches by yellow gorse and broom. There was no red wheat to be seen, and as I prowled, hesitating, on the verge of the open, the sun rose, flooding it all with light and vitality. I came upon a busy swarm of little frogs in a swampy place among the trees. I stopped to look at them, drawing a lesson from their stout resolve to live, and presently, turning suddenly, with an odd feeling of being watched, I beheld something crouching amid a clump of bushes. I stood regarding this. I made a step towards it, and it rose up and became a man armed with the cutlass. I approached him slowly. He stood silent and motionless, regarding me. As I drew nearer, he was dressed in clothes as dusty and filthy as my own. He looked, indeed, as though he had been dragged through a culvert. Nearer, I distinguished the green slime of ditches mixing with the pale drab of dry clay and shiny, coaly patches. His black hair fell over his eyes, and his face was dark and dirty and sunken, so that at first I did not recognize him. There was a cut across the lower part of his face. "Stop!" he cried, when I was within 10 yards of him, and I stopped. His voice was hoarse. "Where do you come from?" he said. I thought, surveying him. "I come from Mortlake," I said. "I was buried near the pit the Martians made about the cylinder. I worked my way out and escaped." "There is no food here," he said. "This is my country. All this hill down to the river and back to Clapham and up to the edge of the common. There is only food for one. Which way are you going?" I answered slowly. "I don't know," I said. "I've been buried in the ruins of a house 13 or 14 days. I don't know what has happened." He looked at me doubtfully, then started, and looked with a changed expression. "I've no wish to stop here," said I. "I think I shall go to Leatherhead, for my wife was there." He shot out a pointing finger. "It is you," he said. "The man from Woking. And you weren't killed at Weybridge?" I recognized him at the same moment. "You're the artilleryman who came into my garden." "Good luck," he said. "We are lucky ones. Fancy you!" He put out a hand, and I took it. "I crawled up a drain," he said, "but they didn't kill everyone. And after they went away, I got off towards Walton's across the fields. But it's not 16 days altogether, and your hair is grey. He looked over his shoulder suddenly. "Only a rook," he said. "One gets to know that birds have shadows these days. This is a bit open. Let us crawl under these bushes and talks." "Have you seen any Martians?" I said. "Since I crawled out of, they've gone away across London," he said. "I guess they got a bit of camp there. Of a night, all over there, Hampstead way, the sky is alive with their lights. It's like a great city, and in the glare you can just see them moving. By daylight you can't. But nearer, I haven't seen them," he counted on his fingers. 5 days. Then I saw a couple across Hammersmith Way carrying something big. And the night before last." He stopped and spoke impressively. "It was just a matter of lights, but it was something up in the air. I believe they built a flying machine and are learning to fly." I stopped on hands and knees, for we had come to the bushes. "Fly! Yes," he said. "Fly!" I went on into a little bower and sat down. "It is all over with humanity," I said. "If they can do that, they will simply go round the world." "They will, but it will relieve things here over a bit. And besides," he looked at me, "aren't you satisfied it is up with humanity?" "I am. We're down. We're beat." He nodded. They were. Oh wait, was it? I stared. As strange as it may seem, I had not arrived at this fact. A fact perfectly obvious as soon as he spoke. I had still held a vague hope. Rather, I had kept a lifelong habit of mine. He repeated his words. "We're beat." They carried absolute conviction. "It's all over," he said. "They've lost one. Just one. And they've made their footing good and crippled the greatest power in the world. They've walked over us. The death of that one at Weybridge was an accident. And these are only pioneers. They keep on coming. These green stars. I see none these 5 or 6 days. But I've no doubt they're falling somewhere every night. Nothing's to be done. We're under. We're beat." I made him no answer. I sat staring before me, trying in vain to decide some countervailing thought. "This isn't a war," said the appealing man. "It was never a war, any more than there's war between men and ants." Suddenly I recalled the night in the observatory. After the 10th shot, they fired no more, at least until the first cylinder came. "How do you know?" said the artillery man. I explained. He thought. "Something wrong with the gun," he said. "But what if there is? They'll get it right again. And even if there's a delay, how can it alter the end? It's just men and ants. There's the ants build their city, live their lives, have wars, revolutions, until the men want them out of the way. Then they go out of the way. That's what we are now. Just ants. Only, yes," I said. "We are eatable ants." We sat looking at each other. "And what would they do to us?" "That's what I've been thinking," he said. "That's what I've been thinking. After Weybridge, I went south, thinking. I saw what was up. Most of the people were hard at it, squealing and exciting themselves. But I'm not so fond of squealing. I've been in sight of death once or twice. I'm not an ornamental soldier, and at the best or worst, death is just death. And it's the man that keeps on thinking comes through. I saw everyone tracking away south. Says I, food won't last this way, and I turned right back. I went for the Martian like a sparrow goes for man. All round, he waved a hand to the horizon. They're starving in heats, bolting, treading on each other. He saw my face and halted awkwardly. No doubt lots who had money had gone away to France, he said. He seemed to hesitate whether to apologize, met my eyes, and went on. There's full all about here. Canned things in shop, wines, spirit, bought mineral waters, and the water mains and drains are empty. Well, I was telling you what I was thinking. Here's intelligent things, I said. And it seems they want us for food. First they smash us up. Ships, machines, guns, cities, all the orders and organization. All that would go. If we were the size of ants, we might pull through. But we're not. It's all too bulky to stop. That's the first certainty, eh? I assented. It is. I've thought it out. Very well, then. Next, at present, we're caught as we're wanted. A Martian has only to go a few miles to get a crowd on the run. And I saw one day, out by Wandsworth, picking up houses to pieces and routing among the wreckage. But they won't keep on doing that. So soon as they settle all of our guns and ships, and smashed our railways, and done all the things they're doing over here, they will begin catching us systematic, picking the best and storing us in cages and things. That's what they will start doing in a bit. Lord, I've not begun on this. Don't you see that? Oh, I actually forgot. Okay, I apologize because this was supposed to be the artillery man, but I didn't realize it. So, not begun, I exclaimed. Not begun. All that's happened so far is through our not having the sense to keep quiet, worrying them with guns and such foolery, and losing our heads, and rushing off in crowds to where there wasn't any more safety than where we were. They don't want to bother us yet. They're making their things, making all the things they couldn't bring with them, getting things ready for the rest of the people. Very likely that's why the cylinders have stopped for a bit, for fear of hitting those who are here. And instead of our rushing about blind on the howl, or getting dynamite on the chance of busting them up, we got to fix ourselves according to the new state of affairs. That's how I figure it out. It isn't quite according to what man wants of these species, but it's about what the facts point to. And that's the principle I acted upon. Cities, nations, civilizations, progress. It's all over. That game's up. We're beat. But if that's so, what is there to live for? The artilleryman looked at me for a moment. There won't be any more blessed concerts for 1,000,000 years or so. There won't be any Royal Academy of Arts, and no nice little feats at restaurants. If it's amusements you're after, I reckon the game is up. If you got any drawing room manners or a dislike to eating peas with a knife, or dropping H's, you better chuck 'em away. They're no further use. I mean that men like me are going on living, for the sake of the breed. I tell you, I'm grim set on living. And if I'm not mistaken, you'll show what insights you've got too, before long. We aren't going to be exterminated. I don't mean to be caught either, and tamed and fattened and bred like thundering ox. Aye, fancy those brown creepers. You don't mean to say. I do. I'm going on, under their feet. I've got it planned. I've thought it out. We're men not beat. We don't know enough. We've got to learn before we've got a chance. And we've got to live and keep independent while we learn. See? That is what has to be done. I stared, astonished, and stirred profoundly by the man's resolution. Great God! Cried I. But you are a man indeed! And suddenly I gripped his hand. Eh? He said with his eyes shining. I've thought it out, eh? Go on, I said. Well, those who mean to escape their catching must get ready. I'm getting ready. Mind you, it isn't all of us that are made for wild beasts, and that's what it's got to be. That's why I watched you. I had my doubts. You're slender? I didn't know that it was you, you see. Or just how you've been... Oh god, this Scottish accent is breaking my voice. All these, the sort of people that live in these houses, and all the small damn little clerks that lives down that way. They be no good. Oh, okay, I've lost the Scottish impression. They haven't any spirit in them. No proud dreams and no proud lusts. And a man who was one or another. Lord, what is he but funking precautions? They just used to skedaddle off to work. I've seen hundreds of them, bit of breakfast in hand, running wild and shining to catch their little season ticket train. For fear they get dismissed if they didn't. Working at businesses they were afraid to take the trouble to understand. Skedaddling back for fear they wouldn't be in back for time for dinner. Keeping indoors after dinner for fear of the back streets. And sleeping with the wives they married, not because they wanted them, but because they've had a bit of money that would make for safety in that one little miserable skedaddle through the world. Lies insured and a bit invested for fear of accidents. And on Sundays, fear of the hereafter.
As if hell was built for rabbits. Well, the Martians would just be a godsend to these. Nice roomy cages, fattening food, careful breeding, no worry. After a week or so chasing about the fields and lands on empty stomachs, they'll come and be caught, cheerful. They'll be quite glad after a bit. They'll wonder what people did before there were Martians to take care of them. And the loaf and mashers and singers. I can imagine them. He said, with a sort of somber gratification. There'll be any amount of something. Oh no, the Scottish accent is destroying my throat. Hold on. There'll be any amount of sentiment and religion and blues among them. There's 100 things I saw with my eyes that I've only begun to see clearly these last few days. There's lots will take things as they are, fat and stupid, and lots will be worried by a sort of feeling when it's all wrong, and that they ought to be doing something. Now, whenever things are so that a lot of people feel ought to be doing something, the weak, and those who go weak with a complicated thinking, always make for a sort of do-nothing religion. Very pious and superior, and submit to persecution and the will of the Lord. Very likely you've seen the same thing. It's energy in a gale of funk, and turned clean inside out. These cages would be full of psalms and hymns and piety, and those of a less simple sort of work will be a bit of, what is it? Eroticism. He paused. Very likely these Martians will make pets of some of them, train them to do tricks, who knows? Get sentimental over the pet boy and who will grow up and had to be killed. And some maybe they'll be trained to hunt us. No, I cried. That's impossible. No human being. What's the good of going on with such lies? Said the artilleryman. There's men who do it cheerful. What nonsense to pretend there isn't. And I succumbed to his convictions. If they come after me, he said. Lord, if they come after me. And subsided into a grim meditation. I sat contemplating these things. I could find nothing to bring against this man's reasonings. In the days before the invasion, no one would have questioned my intellectual superiority to his. I, a professed recognized writer on philosophical themes, and he, a common soldier, and yet he already formulated a situation that I had scarcely realized. What are you doing? I said presently. What plans have you made? He hesitated. Well, it's like this, he said. What have we to do? We have to invent a sort of life where men can live and breed, and be sufficiently secure to bring the children up. Yes, wait a bit, and I'll make it clearer what I think ought to be done. The tame ones will go all tame bases, and in a few generations they'll be big, beautiful, rich-blooded, stupid, or rubbish. The risk is that we who keep wild will go savage, degenerate into a sort of big savage rat. You see how I mean? The lift is on the ground. But I've been thinking about the drains. Of course, those who don't know drains think horrible things. But under this London are miles and miles, hundreds of miles, and a few days rains in London empty will leave them sweet and clean. The main drains are big enough and airy enough for everybody. Then there's cellars, vaults and stores from which bulging passages may be made to the drains. And the railway tunnels and subways, eh? You begin to see? And we form a band, able-bodied, clean-minded men. We're not gonna pick up any rubbish that drifts in. Weaklings go out again. As you meant me to go? Well, I parlayed, didn't I? We won't quarrel about that. Go on. Those who stop obey orders. Able-bodied, clean-minded women we also want. Mothers and teachers. Not lackadaisical ladies. No blasted rolling eyes. We can't have any weak or silly. Life is real again, and the useless and cumbersome and mischievous have to die. They ought to die. They ought to be willing to die. It's a sort of disloyalty after all, to live and think the race, and they can't be happy. Moreover, dying's none so dreadful. It's the funking that makes it bad. And in all those places we shall gather, our district will be London, and we may even be able to keep a watch and run about in the open when the Martians keep away. Play cricket, perhaps. That's how we shall save the race. Eh? It's a possible thing. But saving the race is nothing in itself. And I say, that's only being rats. It's saving our knowledge and adding to it is the thing. Then men like you come in. There's books, there's models. We must make great safe places down deeps and get all the books we can. Not novels and poetry stripes, but ideas, science books. That's where men like you come in. We must go to the British Museum and pick all those books through. Especially we must keep our science. Learn more. We must watch these Martians. Some of us must go as spies. When it's all working, perhaps I will. Get caught, I mean. And the great thing is, we must leave the Martians alone. We mustn't even steal. If we get in their bay, we clear out. We must show them we mean no harm. Yes, I know. But they're intelligent things, and they won't hunt us down if they have all they want, and think we're harmless vermin. The artilleryman paused and laid a brown hand upon my arm. Hey, Poche. Okay, I'm gonna take a rest for like... You have no idea how painful and static-minded this Scottish voice is making me. Oh wow, I don't know if the character is meant to be Scottish, but I think I'm just thinking of a Highlander whenever or a Dragoon, so yes. So Pochik, I'm sorry, I know you're from the UK, but I'm really sorry that you're gonna have to hear this botched Scottish. After all, it may not be so much we may have to learn before. Just imagine this. 4 or 5 of their fighting machines starting off. Heat rays right and left, and not a Martian in them. Not a Martian in them, but men who have learned the way how. It may be in my time even, those men. Fancy having one of them lovely things with its heat wave wide and free. Fancy having it in control. What would it matter if you smashed it? Nah, it's okay. What would it matter if you smashed it to smithereens at the end of a run? After a bust like that, I reckon the Martians opened their beautiful eyes. Can't you see them, man? Can't you see them hurrying, puffing and blowing and hooting their mechanical affairs? Something out in gear in every case. And swish, bang, rattle, swish, just as they fumbling over it. Swish comes the heat ray, and behold, man has come back to his own. For a while, the imaginative daring of the artilleryman and the tone and the tone and assurance and courage he assumed completely dominated my mind. I believe unhesitatingly both in his forecast of human destiny and in the practicability of his astonishing scheme. And the reader who thinks me susceptible and foolish must contrast his position, reading steadily with all his thoughts about his subject and mine, crouching fearfully in the bushes and listening, distracted by apprehension. We talked in this manner through the early morning time, and later crept out of the bushes, and, after scanning the sky for Martians, hurried perceptibly to the house on Putney Hill where he had made his lair. It was the coal cellar of the place, and when I saw the work he had spent a week upon, it was a burrow scarcely 10 yards long, which designed to reach the main drain of Putney Hill. I had my first inkling of the gulf between his dreams and his power. Such a hole I could have dug in a day. But I believed in him sufficiently to work with him all that morning until past midday with his digging. We had a garden barrow and shot the earth we removed against the kitchen range. We refreshed ourselves with a tin of mock turtle soup and wine from the neighboring pantry. I found a curious relief from the aching strangeness of the world in this steady labor. As we worked, I turned his project over in my mind, and presently objections and doubts began to arise. But I worked there all the morning, so glad was I to find myself with purpose again. After working an hour, I began to speculate on the distance one had to go before the cloaca was reached, the chances we had of missing it altogether. My immediate trouble was why we should dig this long tunnel, when it was possible to get into the drain at once down one of the manholes, and work back into the house.
It seemed to me, too, that the house was inconveniently chosen and required a needless length of tunnel. Just as I was beginning to face these things, the artilleryman stopped work digging and looked at me. "We're working well," he said. He put down his spade. "Let's just knock off for a bit. I think it's time we reconnoitered from the roof of the house." I was for going on, and after a hesitation he resumed his spade. And suddenly I was struck by a thought. I stopped, and so did he at once. "Why were you walking about the common?" I said, "instead of being here?" "Taking the air," he said. "I was coming back. It's safer by night." "But the work?" "Oh, one can't always work," he said. In a flash I saw the man plain. He hesitated, holding his spade. "We ought to reconnoiter now," he said, "because if any come near, they may hear the spades and drop upon us unaware." I was no longer disposed to object. We went together to the roof and stood on a ladder peeping out of the roof door. No Martians were to be seen, and we ventured out on the tiles and slipped down under shelter of the parapet. From this position, a shrubbery hid... What? Who pinged me? From this position, a shrubbery hid a portion of Putney, but we could see the river below. Alright, hold on, river below. A bubbly mass of red weed and the low parts of Lambeth flooded and red. The red creeper swarmed up the trees about the old palace, and their branches stretched gaunt and dead, and set with shriveled leaves from amid his clusters. It was strange how entirely dependent both of these things were upon flowing water for their propagation. About neither of us had gained the footing. Laburnums, pink maize, snowballs, and a tree of arbor vitae, rosa the laurels, and hydrangeas green and brilliant into the sunlight. Beyond Kensington, dense smoke was rising, and a blue haze hid toward the northward hills. The artilleryman began to tell me the sort of people who still remain in London. "One night last week," he said, "some fools got the electric light on order, and there was all Regent Streets and the circus ablaze, crowded with painted and ragged drunkards, men and women, dancing and shouting till dawn. A man who was there told me. As the day came, they became aware of a fire machine standing near by the Langham, and looking down at them. Heavens know how long he had been there. He must have been giving them some of them a nasty turn. He came down the road towards them, and picked up nearly 100 too drunk or frightened to run away. Grotesque gleam of a time no history will ever fully describe. From that, in answer to my questions, he came round to his grandiose plans again. He grew enthusiastic. He talked so eloquently of the possibility of capturing a fighting machine that I more than half believed in him again. But now that I was beginning to understand something of his quality, I could divine the stress he laid on doing nothing precipitously. And I noted now there was no question he was purposely was to capture and fight the great machine. After a time, we went down to the cellar. Neither of us seemed disposed to resume digging, and when he suggested a meal, I was nothing loath. He became suddenly very generous, and we had eaten. He went away and returned some excellent cigars. We lit these, and his optimism glowed. He was inclined to regard my coming as a great occasion. "There's some champagne in the cellar," he said. "We can dig better on this tame side Burgundy," said I. "No," said he. "I am host today. Champagne? Great God! We've a heavy enough task before us. Let's take a rest and gather strength while we may. Look at these blistered hands." And pursuant to this idea of a holiday, he insisted upon playing cards after we had eaten. He had taught me Euchre, and after dividing London between us, Euchre? Okay, hold on. I actually need to find this out. This sounds like a sport. What is Euchre? Sorry, poor chick. This is what I usually do sometimes in case there's like in case there is a term I don't really understand. Usually, in this case, I usually just search it up. So let me just see here. Usually, is a 4-player trump game where the players. I see. So I'm not really sure how to explain Euchre. Yeah, it's a card game. It's a card game, and Players are paired to form 2 partnerships. Uses a deck of 24 playing cards consisting of I think the ace, king, queen, jack, 10, and 9, or each of the 4 suits. This is very interesting. March. Okay, so I don't really know how to explain it. Yeah, like card-based Monopoly. Yeah, basically like that. So I don't really know how to explain this fully. Also, why is my aircon not working? So yes, this is Yushe card game. So when I point this out as something we could discuss, because this is interesting, because also the poacher who stays in Great Britain. I've not figured out any of these other terms before. Okay. Yeah, the Scottish accent has completely burnt up my throat. And after dividing London between us, I taking the north side and he the southern, we played for parish points. Grotesque and foolish as this would seem to the sober reader, it is absolutely true. And what is more remarkable, I found the card game and several others we played extremely interesting. Strange mind of man, that with our species upon the edge of extermination or appalling degradation, with no clear prospect before us but the chance of a horrible death, we could sit following the chance of this painted pasteboard and playing the Joker with vivid light. Afterwards he taught me poker, and I beat him at 3 tough chess games. When dark came, we decided to take the risk and lit a lamp. After an interminable string of games, we supped, and the artilleryman finished the champagne. We went on smoking the cigars. He was no longer the energetic regenerator of his species I had encountered in the morning. He was still optimistic, but it was a less kinetic, more thoughtful optimism. I remember he wound out with my health, proposed in a speech of small variety and considerable intermittence. I took a cigar and went upstairs to look at the lights of which he had spoken, that blazed so greenly along the Highgate hills. At first I stared unintelligently across the London Valley. The northern hills were shrouded in darkness. The fires near Kensington glowed redly, and now and then an orange-red tongue of flame flashed up and vanished into the deep blue night. All of the rest of London was black. Then nearer, I perceived a strange light, a pale, violent purple fluorescent glow, quivering under the night breeze. For a space I could not understand it, and then I knew it must be the red wheat from which this faint irradiation proceeded. With that realization, my dormant sense of wonder, my sense of the proportions of things, awoke again. I glanced from that to Mars, red and clear, glowing high in the west, and then gazed long and earnestly at the darkness of Hampstead and Highgate. I remained a very long time upon the roof, wondering at the grotesque changes of the day. I recalled my mental states from the midnight prayer to the foolish card playing. I had a violent revulsions of fleeting. I remember I flung away the cigar with a certain wasteful symbolism. My folly came to me with glaring exaggeration. I seemed a traitor to my wife and to my kind. I was filled with remorse. I resolved to leave this strange, undisciplined dreamer of great things to his drink and gluttony, and to go on into London. There, it seemed to me, I had the best chance of learning what the Martians and my fellow men were doing. I was still upon the roof when the late moon rose. Alright, oh my god. That was such a long chapter. 2 chapters away though. Give me a second, I'll be right back. We're gonna take a longer break in the meantime because that completely burnt out my throat. Okay, I'm back. Yeah, Pochik, it's a really great book, and so far, you can like one interesting thing I noted in this chapter was, the first thing was, again, a very thinly veiled criticism of imperialism, because Wells is not even trying to hide that he's the protagonist of this book, but at the same time, he also cannot hide. Some of the stories are scared to me when they are set in England, because I can imagine about the places they talk about. Yeah, practically that's pretty true. Like, I can relate to this to some people who played games like Modern Warfare 2 when the invasion scenes in America were set in places like Virginia, and they were scared because if they lived in Virginia or Washington, they can actually recognize the place they're fighting in. So I kind of understand you, Pochek, and definitely if something Malaysia seems desolate, like how I write my stories, yes, like Mass Effect London Attack. Yeah, that was actually really scary because it's very realistic and whatnot. Yeah, and basically to places that are home and easily accessible to all these media, right? So let's say if I write about modern day Malaysia being under attack, that scene was really hard hitting to me. It was scary because some of the old world architecture is there, so it really feels like an alien invasion upon us. And it's not like that New York effect where New York is always the center of alien invasion. If it's close to home and you feel it, and if you've been there, it can be quite scary. It's not like Avengers, because Avengers is more superhero, right? But the Mass Effect and this book has that raw element of savagery of aliens attacking us. No superheroes, just militaries against aliens and whatnot. So that's one part of it. Okay, now to go back to the other part, Wells has clearly raw. Hello Dika, welcome. You kind of missed the Scottish impression. Okay, so I was gonna say, okay, so the thinly veiled criticisms of imperialism against the British Empire here is very thinly veiled, and the book always had the role of a criticism of British imperialism. But it is here I feel like is where the most strongest comparisons come in, because you can quite clearly tell not only from the way the narrator places his arguments and how he equates Britain as the power of the world, who has subjected other native countries to colonialism under the heel of the Martian invaders. So it is basically just a very overt one. But the other subtle one that I can point out is the artilleryman himself. Now, the artilleryman himself is a very interesting topic of discussion, because he, like, this may not seem justified because maybe he's actually just a dreamer and nothing else. But if I were to be the one talking about the story, which I am right now, I would say the artilleryman is just as crazy as the curate that we've met, except that where the curate was despondent, useless, and could not defend for himself and ended up dying because of his gluttony and in his his greed and gluttony. The artilleryman is a different kind of crazy, a reassuring kind of courageous crazy, but one that is deconstructed as being fanciful and imaginative, sort of like a writer. Wells, philosophical writer. To point that out, Wells just basically outed himself there. He said, I, a writer of philosophical things, just kind of said, yeah, you know what? Yeah, this character is me. So it's kind of funny thing that called, but the character of Artilleryman and the way he describes how London itself has turned into cows that are willing to go into the slavery of the Martians also points out what happened at home. I'm not so sure if this is correct, Pochik, because you're British yourself, but what I'm getting from this story is that while the artilleryman is certifiably crazy because of the beliefs he held and, well, the idea that he can hijack a fighting war machine, the idea of this fighting against the people of London, the weak and willed, the drunk, the people who go in and out not knowing what to do in their lives, it's very interesting because it's Wells's idea placed into a character who is easily deconstructed as someone who dreams too big for himself and doesn't take anything realistically, such as when we were exposed to his burrow, which is like only a few meters deep, like really just short diameter, and he's really easily tired out after that. That kind of criticism I think can also be constructed as a sort of self-deprecation, because as much as Wells likes to complain about British imperialism affecting not only other peoples of the world but also the people at home, there's a certain amount of reality that goes into making the British Empire work. So in that, I guess he kind of acknowledges that there are faults with the British Empire, but at the same time those faults make Britain a powerhouse at the time. So this is what I can infer from it, and it's very interesting to see it from this perspective, I guess, because I don't know, if I am sounding a bit odd,
I'm not so sure how to structure this other than the fact that both what happens throughout this novel, the artilleryman's grand scheme of getting back into order, which by the way, T gave them power. Yeah, basically T gave them power, and now the aliens have come over, taken over in Britain. So yes. Now, interestingly, the plot discussed by the artilleryman is actually the plot of the time traveler's machine, especially in the future between the Morlocks and the Eloi. So if you have not read the Time Travelers, is it the Time Traveler or the Time Machine? The Time Machine, right? A similar plot occurs between the Morlocks and the Elois, two futuristic offshoots of humanity in the future. And the way that Wells puts it here, how the artilleryman wants to, yeah, the Time Machine is excellent. It's a very nice speculatory fiction. But anyway, the way that the artilleryman pieces it together makes it sound like either Wells is referencing this story. I need to figure out, when did the Time Machine come out? The Time Machine. So the Time Machine came out in the Time Machine came out in 1895, right? And the War of the Worlds. The War of the World. Okay, so War of the Worlds came out in. Although I liked it better in the first half, didn't really care about the love story aspect. Maybe that's just Wells injecting his optimism inside it. So I guess since War of the Worlds was written and published in 1897, I guess what the story is well thought out. Actually, if you ask me, right, Wells, as great as any story writer can be, I feel like some of the stories rely too much on his ego. So writers and artists can be somewhat very dastardly egotistical people, and I think here, right, the way that the narrator puts himself and how Wells describes how Wells scathingly criticizes his own country is indicative of his ego. It's another psychological thing I can talk about. It's very interesting. I gotta go for an appointment. Enjoy the rest of the stream. Okay, no problem, Pochek. You go and have fun, okay? Best of luck to you. So basically, that egotistic is quite clearly obvious because it makes it the narrator to the narrator. Wells does not hide the fact that he has disdain for his country and sees the Martian as some kind of great reckoning. And I don't think it's annoying. It's just heavy-handed, and at the time I guess it's justified because there's no way to get your ideas out until like now, where you can just kind of put it on Twitter and say, oh, my idea is here. So you need to do it in a very heavy-handed way and through the book. So yes, it's very fascinating to see how evolved putting out ideas have become. So yeah, I don't know how you say it as well. Yeah, basically that was talking about, and I guess like I guess I can talk about it a bit more. If you have any idea, if you have like any thoughts on War of the Worlds from what you have read so far or listened to me, if you were able to listen, because I think my reading is also a bit wonky, and please do let me know, because yeah, I find the story very interesting, especially in book 2, because book 2 starts to delve into that post-apocalyptic analyzation of humanity through not only the curate in his greedy bloodlust and how he gets him killed, but in the artilleryman, because his insanity is infectious positivity and that kind of like chittering teeth chomping sense of exhilaration that yes, we can go under, we can survive. He's like a crazy survivalist from the modern days, except he's clearly overthinking it, like most survivalists. Okay, so I think I have done enough discussion about this chapter. Let's try and move on to Dead London. This is chapter 8. Let me just see. We've got a little bit more coming around. Okay, yeah, okay. The book will be done. Oh, okay. Alright. Let's see here. Okay. Chapter 8. Dead London. After I had parted from the artilleryman, I went down the hill and by High Street across the bridge to Fulham. The red weed was tumultuous at the time and nearly choked the bridge roadways, but its fronts were already whitened in patches by the spreading breeze that presently removed it so swiftly. At the corner of the lane that runs to Putney Bridge Station, I found a man lying. He was as black as a sweep with the black dust, alive but helplessly and speechlessly drunk. But I could get nothing from him but curses and furious lunges at my head. I think I should have stayed by him but for the brutal expression of his face. There was black dust along the roadway from the bridge onwards, and it grew thicker in Fulham. The streets were horribly quiet. I got food, sour, hard, and moldy, but quite edible, in a baker shop here. Some way towards Walham Green, the streets became clearer powder, and I passed a white terrace of houses on fire. The noises of the burning was an absolute relief. Going on to Brompton, the streets were quiet again. Give me a second. I think my dog wants to leave the room. I'll be right back. What the dog doing? The dog want to leave. Dog want to leave room. He will leave the room. Oh, doesn't he want to go back in? Okay, now another dog has come into the room. I see. Yeah, my two pets that you've seen on social media just have like a weird habit of just coming in and out of my room. It's really cute, but I now have a special door latch that allows me to close the door automatically, so they kind of come into the room and get trapped, so I feel bad for them. Anyway, where was I? Here I came once more upon the black powder in the streets and upon dead bodies. I saw altogether about a dozen in the length of the Fulham Road. They had been dead many days, so that I hurried quickly past them. The black powder covered them over and softened their outlines. One or two had been disturbed by dogs. Where there was no black powder, it curiously looked like a Sunday in the city, with the closed shops, the houses locked up and the blinds drawn, the desertion and the stillness. In some places plunderers had been at work, but rarely at other than the provision and wine shops. A jeweler's windows had been broken open in one place, but apparently the thief had been disturbed, and a number of gold chains and a watch were scattered on the pavement. I did not trouble to touch them. Further on was a tattered woman that in a heap on the doorstep. The hand that hung over her knee was gashed and bled down her rusty brown dress, and a smashed magnum of champagne formed a pool across the pavement. She seemed asleep, but she was dead. I penetrated in London, the profounder I grew the stillness. But it was not so much the stillness of death. It was the stillness of suspense, of expectations. At any time the destruction that had already singed the northwestern borders of the metropolis and then annihilated Ealing and Kilburn might strike among these houses and leave them smoking ruins. It was a city condemned and derelict. In South Kensington, the streets were clear of dead and of black powder. It was near South Kensington that I first heard the howling. It crept almost imperceptibly upon my senses. It was a sobbing alternation of two noises. Ula, 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 keeping on perpetually. When I passed streets that ran northward, it grew in volume, and houses and buildings seemed to deaden and cut it off again. It came in a full tide down Exhibition Road. I stopped, staring towards Kensington Gardens, wondering at the strange remote wailing. It was as if that mighty desert of houses had found a voice for its fear and solitude. Ula, 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 wailed that superhuman note. Great waves of sound sweeping down the broad sunlit roadway, between the tall buildings on each side. I turned northwards, marveling, towards the iron gates of Hyde Park. I had half a mind to break into the Natural History Museum and find my way up to the summit of the towers in order to see across the park, but I decided to keep to the ground, where quick hiding was possible, and so went on up the Exhibition Road. All the large mansions on each side of the road were empty and still, and my footsteps echoed against the side of the houses. At the top, near the park gate, I came across a strange sight: a bust of it overturned and the skeleton of a horse picked clean. I puzzled over this for a time, and then went on to the bridge over the Serpentine. The voice grew stronger and stronger, Though I could see nothing above the housetops and on the north side of the park, save a haze of smoke to the northwest. "Ula!" cried the voice, coming, as it seemed to me, from the districts about Regent Park. The desolating cry worked upon my mind. The mood that had sustained me passed. The wailing took possession of me. I found I was intensely weary, footsore, and now again hungry and thirsty. It was already noon. Why was I wandering alone in this city of the dead? Why was I alone when all London was lying in state and in its black shroud? I felt intolerably lonely. My mind ran on old friends that I had forgotten for years. I thought of the poisons in the chemist's shop, of the liquids the wine merchants had stored. I recalled the two sodden creatures of despair who, so far as I knew, shared the city with myself. I came into Oxford Street by the Marble Arch, and here again were black powder and several bodies, and an evil, ominous smell from the gratings of the cellars of some of the houses. I grew very thirsty after the heat of my long walk. With infinite trouble, I managed to break into a public house and get food and drink. I was weary after eating, and went into the parlor behind the bar, and slept on a black horsehair sofa I found there. I awoke to find that dismal howling still in my ears. Hola! I'm sorry, that's just like this. I don't know how to say this strange noise. It was now dusk, and after I had routed out some biscuits and a cheese in the bar, there was a meat safe, but it contained nothing but maggots. Ular. I wandered on through the silent residential squares to Baker Street. Portman Square is the only one I can name, and so came on at last upon Regent's Park. As I emerged from the top of Baker Street, I saw far and away over the trees in the clearness of the sunset the hood of a Martian giant from which this howling proceeded. I was not terrified. I came upon him as if it were a matter of course. I watched him for some time, but he did not move. He appeared to be standing and yelling for no reason that I could discover. I tried to formulate a plan of action. That perpetual sound of whatever he was doing confused my mind. It was actually written Ula here, but I just said that because I do not want to say that noise again. Perhaps I was too tired to be very fearful. Certainly I was more curious to know the reason of this monotonous crying than afraid. I turned back away from the park and struck into Park Road, intending to skirt the park. Went along under the shelter of the terraces and got a view of the stationary, howling Martians from the direction of St. John's Wood. A couple of 100 yards out of Baker Street, I heard a yelping chorus and saw first a dog with a piece of putrescent red meat in his jaws coming headlong towards me, and then a pack of starving mongrels in pursuit of him. He made a wide curve to avoid me, as though he feared I might prove a fresh competitor. As the yelping died away down the silent road, the wailing sound of the Martian reasserted itself. I came upon the wrecked handling machine halfway to St. John's Wood Station. At first I thought a house had fallen across the road. It was only as I clambered among the ruins that I saw, with a start, this mechanical Samson lying, with his tentacles bent and smashed and twisted, amongst the ruin it had made. The forepart was shattered. It seemed as it had been driven blindly straight at the house, and had been overwhelmed in its overthrow. It seemed to me that this might have happened by a handling machine escaping from the guidance of its Martian. I could not clamber among the ruin to see it, and the twilight was now so far advanced that the blood with which its seat was smeared, and the gout gristle of the Martian that the dogs had left, were invisible to me. Wondering still more at all I had seen, I pushed on towards La Primrose Hill. Oh, my reading is getting a bit blurry. Far away, through a gap in the trees, I saw a second Martian, as motionless as the first, standing in the park towards the zoological gardens, and silent. A little beyond the ruins, about the smashed handling machine, I came upon the red weed again, and found the Regent's Canal a spongy mass of dark red vegetation. As I crossed the bridge, the sound of the Martian ceased, as it was, as it were, cut off. The silence came like a thunderclap. The dusky houses about me stood faint and tall and dim. The trees towards the park were glowing black. All about me, the red weed clambered among the ruins, riding to get above me in the dimness. Night, the mother of fear and mystery, was coming upon me. But while that virtue sounded, the solitude, the desolation, had been endurable. By virtue of it, London had still seemed alive, and the sense of life about me had upheld me. Then suddenly a change. The passing of something. I knew not what. Then the stillness that could be felt. Nothing but this gaunt quiet. London about me gazed at me spectrally. The windows in the white houses were like the eye socket of skulls. About me, my imagination found 1,000 noiseless enemies moving. Terror seized me, a horror of my temerity. In front of me, the road became pitchy black as though it was dark, and I saw a contorted shape lying across the pathway. I could not bring myself to go on. I turned down St. John's Wood Road and ran headlong from its unendurable stillness towards Kilburn. I hid from the night and the silence until long after midnight in a cabman's shelter in Harrow Road. But before the dawn, my courage returned, and while the stars were still in the sky, I turned once more towards Regent Park. I missed my way among the streets, and presently saw down a long avenue, and the half-light of the early dawn, the curve of Primrose Hill. On the summit, towering to the fading stars, was a third Martian, erect and motionless like the others. An insane resolve possessed me. I would die and end it, and I would save myself even the trouble of killing myself. I marched on recklessly towards this titan, and then, as I drew nearer and the light grew, I saw that a multitude of black birds I saw that a multitude of black birds was circling and clustering about the hood. At that, my heart gave a bound, and I began running along the road. I hurried through the red reed that choked St. Edmund's Terrace. I waded breast high across the torrent of water that was rushing down from the waterworks towards the Albert Road, and emerged upon the grass before the rising of the sun. Great mounds had been heaped about the crest of the hill, making a huge redoubt of it. It was the final and largest place the Martians had made, and from behind these heaps there rose a thin smoke against the sky. Against the skyline, an eager dog ran and disappeared. The thought had flashed into my mind, grew real, grew credible. I felt no fear, only a wild, trembling exultation as I ran up the hill towards the motionless monster. Out of the hood hung lank shreds of brown, at which the hungry birds pecked and tore. In another moment, I had scrambled up the earthen rampart and stood upon its crest, and the interior of the redoubt was below me. A mighty space it was, with giant machines here and there within it, huge mounds of materials on strange shelter places, and scattered about it, some in their overturned war machines, some in the now rigid handling machines, and a dozen of them stark and silent and laid in a row, were the Martians, dead, slain by the putrefactive and diseased bacteria against which their systems were unprepared, slain as the red weed was being slain after all man's devices had failed by the humblest things that God, in his wisdom, had put upon this earth. For so it had come about, as indeed I and many men might have foreseen had not terror and disaster blinded our mind. These germs of disease have taken toll on humanity since the beginning of things, taken toll of our pre-human ancestors since life began here. But by virtue of this natural selection of our kind, we have developed resisting power. To no germs do we succumb without a struggle, and to many, those that cause putrefaction in dead matter. For instance, our living frames are altogether immune. But there are no bacteria in Mars, and directly these invaders arrived, directly they drank and fed, our microscopic allies began to work their overthrow. Already when I watched them, they were irrevocably doomed, dying and rotting even as they went to and fro. It was inevitable. By the toll of 1 billion deaths, man has bought his birthright of the earth, and it is his against all comers. It would still be his were the Martians 10 times as mighty as they are, for neither do men live nor die in vain. Here and there they were scattered, nearly 50 altogether, in that great gulf they had made, overtaken by a death that must have seemed to them as incomprehensible as any death could be. To me also at the time this death was incomprehensible. All I knew was that these things that had been alive and so terrible to men were dead. And for a moment I believed that the destruction of Sennacherib had been repeated, that God had repented, that the angel of death had slain them in the night. Alright, Sennacherib. This sounds like a biblical thing, but I'm not so sure. Even I'm like... Okay, hold on, let's see. Biblical thing? Let me see here. What is Sennacherib? Sennacherib is was the king of Near Assyrian Empire from his death in the Bible. Oh, this was it. Is this Nebuchadnezzar? Let me just see here. Sorry, this seems very interesting. Let me just see what's going on. Oh, it was in the Bible, but I don't really know. It's King Sennacherib. Oh, invades Judah. I see. And that very night, the angel of the Lord set out and struck down 185,000 in the camp of the Assyrians. When morning dawned, they were all dead bodies. Then King Sennacherib of Assyria left, went home and lived in Nineveh. As he was worshipping in the house of his gods Nisroch, his sons Jemelech and Sharezer killed him with a sword, and escaped into the land of Ararat. The son Esarhaddon had succeeded him. So basically, Sennacherib, yes, angel of death. Same thing is happening here. Also, my brain is just dying. Okay, so let me see. Alright. Here we go. So Sennacherib is basically just a basically a metaphor for mass death. I stood staring into the pit, and my heart lightened gloriously, even as the rising sun struck the world to fire about me with his rays. The pit was still in darkness. The mighty engines, so great and powerful, wonderful in their power and complexity, so unearthly in their tortuous forms, rose weird and vague and strange out of the shadows towards the lights. A multitude of dogs, I could hear, fought over the bodies that lay darkly in the depth of the pit, far below me. Across the pit, on its furthest lip, flat and vast and strange, lay the great flying machine which they had been experimenting upon our denser atmosphere when decay and death arrested them. Death had come not a day too soon. At the sound of a calling overhead, I looked up at the huge fighting machine that would fight no more forever, at the tattered red shreds of flesh that dripped down upon the overturned seats on the summit of Primrose Hill. I turned and looked down the slope of the hill to where, enhaloed now in birds, stood those other two Martians that I seen overnight, just as death had overtaken them. The one that had died, even as he had been crying to his companions. Perhaps he was the last to die, and his gun had gone on perpetually until the force of his machinery was exhausted. They glittered now, harmless tripod towers of shining metal, in the brightness of the rising sun. All about the pit, and saved by a miracle from everlasting destruction, stretched the great mother of cities. Those who have only seen London veiled in her somber robes of smoke can scarcely imagine the naked clearness and beauty of the silent wilderness of houses. Eastward, over the blackened ruins of the Albert Terrace and the splintered spire of the church, the sun blazed dazzling in the clear sky, and here and there some facet in the great wilderness of roofs caught the light and glared with a white intensity. It touched even the round store place for wines by the chalk farm station, and that vast railway yards, marked once with a greening of black rails, but red-lined now with the quick rusting of a fortnight's disuse, with something of the mystery of beauty. Northward were Kilburn and Hampstead, blue and crowded with houses. Westward the great city was dimmed. And southward, beyond the Martians, the green wash of Regent's Park, the Langham Hotel, the dome of the Albert Hall, the Imperial Institutes, and the giant mansions of the Brompton Road came out clear and little in the sunrise, the jagged ruins of Westminster rising hastily beyond. Far away and blue were the Surrey Hills, and the towers of the Crystal Palace glittered like two silver rods. The dome of St. Paul's was dark against the sunrise, and injured, I saw for the first time, by a huge gaping cavity on its western side. And as I looked at this wide expanse of houses and factories and churches, silent and abandoned, as I thought of the multitudinous hopes and efforts, the innumerable hosts of lives that had gone to build this human reef, and of the swift and ruthless destruction that had hung over it all, when I realized that the shadow had been rolled back, and that men might still live in the streets, and this dear, vast dead city of mine might be once more alive and powerful. I felt a wave of emotion that was near akin to tears. The torment was over. Even that day, the healing would begin. The survivors of the people scattered over the country, leaderless, lawless, foodless, like sheep without a shepherd. The thousands who had fled by sea would begin to return. The pulse of life, growing stronger and stronger, would beat again the empty streets and pour across the vacant squares. Whatever destruction was done, the hand of the destroyer was stayed. All the gone wrecks, the blackened skeletons of the houses that stared so dismally and at the sunlight glass of the hill, would presently be echoing with the hammers of the restorers and ringing with the tapping of their trowels. At the thought, I extended my hands towards the sky and began thanking God. In a year, I thought. In a year. With overwhelming force came the thought of myself, of my wife, and the old life of hope and tender hopefulness that had ceased forever. Hey, chapter 8 is done, and now we come to the last chapter. Now this is a shocker, isn't it? This was actually quite cleverly foreshadowed by the red wheat dying quite quickly. And with the red wheat dying, I guess an eagle-eyed reader could actually point out that if the Martian flora can suffer, so does the Martian fauna. And yes, the Martians are now dead. The details are quite gritty compared to like Steven Spielberg's version of War of the Worlds. So yes, I get to say that although he's very cynical. Is this the sleeping? Huh? What do you mean? Now basically the whole thing about the Martians dying en masse is actually quite surprisingly optimistic for how the tone of the book has been portrayed. It's kind of a bittersweet thing because I think you can consider this the ending of the book because the Martians are gone. There's still a chapter after this, but this is the definitive end of the Martian threat because the Martians, vanquished by a bacteria, now are dead and their technology either can be used by us or, you know, salvaged. But other than that, yes, this is a very fascinating end to the War of the Worlds, or at least the enemies of the War of the Worlds, in that the first signs of life that we see that have taken chunks of them are actual dogs. Funny, isn't it? Crows and dogs are the ones that have ripped apart these carcasses of the animals and turned it into a meal for themselves. Not our guns took out only one of them, right? And the Thunderchild has taken out two of them. But it turns out that the smallest microorganism on our planet kills them all. It's a very funny thing. But I guess it also is a testament to natural evolution. And I don't really know what else to say. There is no direct comparisons that can be made with the mass die-outs of the Martians. Ah, hello Hunter Okami, welcome. And basically it's a very biblical event towards the narrator in this context, but and to us also somewhat biblical. But I guess if you look at it logically, it kind of makes sense because microfriends are very dangerous. Ah yes, I don't know what season we're living in now. The Martians must have got whatever they came. Oh no, let's not do that joke. It's a testament to the power of microorganisms, and as you can see in our world today, it's fucking us up too. So yes, very interesting. I'm also eating mints for some weird ass reason. So yes, this is the end of War of the Worlds. Towards the enemies, the Martians are gone, but we still have one more chapter to cover. And so because this chapter is pretty quick, I think I'll just wrap this up and see how long this is. Oh no, there's actually like few pages left. There's actually 2 more chapters left. So yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, like, the death of the Martians, do you think it's too sudden or does it make sense? Because although it does not seem very apparent they're gonna fall prey to diseases, it was foreshadowed by the fact that their flora died to our micro bacteria, as noted by the narrator. So it's very interesting to see that the flora goes first and then the fauna follows after. And if you, and because pack of wasabi beans is bringing up Tom Cruise's book. This is also how his character finds out the Martians are waning because disease is also overtaking them, and the machine in that movie also is accosted by birds. So it's a similar thing that they follow about. So yes, very interesting. Yes. So yeah, I guess it's unintentionally very unintentionally very relatable in the light of our current world events, and not too bad to know that disease was also on the minds of these people. I mean, they probably suffered the Spanish flu after that. So yes, let's not waste any more time. We're almost near the end. Guys. 2 more chapters and then we can finish this up. Get to see some Martians. Yeah, basically they just died to diseases like that. No more Martians to kill and eat people. Isn't that a happy ending? And now comes the strangest thing in my story. Yet perhaps it is not altogether strange. I remember clearly and coldly and vividly all that day I did until the time that I stood weeping and praising God upon the summit of Primrose Hills. And then I forget. Of the next 3 days I know nothing. I have learned since that, so far from my being the first discoverer of the Martian overthrow, several such wanderers as myself had already discovered this on the previous night. The one man, the first, had gone to Saint Martin's Le Grand, and while I sheltered in the cabman's hut, had contrived to telegraph to Paris. Thence the joyful news had flashed all over the world. 1,000 cities, chilled by ghastly apprehensions, suddenly flashed into frantic illuminations. They knew of it in Dublin, Edinburgh, Manchester, Birmingham, at the time when I stood upon the verge of the pit. Already men, weeping with joy, as I have heard, shouting and staying their works to shake hands and shout, were making up trains, even as near as Crewe, to descend upon London. The church bells that had ceased a fortnight since suddenly caught the news, until all England was bell ringing. Men on cycles, lean-faced, unkempt, scorched along every country lane, shouting of unhoped deliverance, shouting to God, staring figures of despair. And for the food, across the Channel, across the Irish Sea, across the Atlantic, corn, bread, and meat were tearing to our relief. All the shipping in the world seemed going Londonward in those days. But of all this I have no memory. I drifted, a demented man. I found myself in a house of kindly people who had found me on the 3rd day wandering, weeping and raving through the streets of St. John's Woods. They have told me since that I was singing some inane doggerel about the last man alive. Hurrah! The last man alive! Troubled as they were with their own affairs, these people, whose name, much as I would like to express my gratitude to them, I may not even give here, nevertheless cumbered themselves with me, sheltered me and protected me from myself. Apparently they had learned something of my story from me during the days of my lapse. Very gently, when my mind was assured again, did they break to me what they had learned of the fate of Leatherhead. 2 days after I was in prison, it had been destroyed, with every soul in it by a Martian. He had swept it out of existence, as it seemed, without any provocation, as a boy might crush an anthill in a mere wantonness of power. I was a lonely man, and they were very kind to me. I was a lonely man and a sad one, and they bore with me. I remained with them 4 days after my recovery. All that time I felt a growing craving to look once more on whatever remained of the little life that seemed so happy and bright in my past. It was a mere hopeless desire to feast upon my misery. They dissuaded me. They did all I could to divert me from this morbidity. But at last I could resist the impulse no longer, and promising faithfully to return to them, and parting, as I will confess, from these 4-day friends with tears, I went out again into the streets that had lately been so dark and strange and empty. And they were busy with returning people. In places even there were shops open, and I saw a drinking fountain running water. I remember how mockingly bright the day seemed as I went back on my melancholy pilgrimage to the little house at Woking. How busy the streets and vivid the moving life about me. So many people were abroad everywhere, busy in 1,000 activities, that it seemed incredible that any great proportion of the population could have been slain. But then I noticed how yellow were the skins of the people I met, how shaggy the hair of men, how large and bright their eyes, and that every man still wore his dirty rags. Their faces seem all with one of two expressions, a leaping exaltation and energy, or a grim resolution. Save for an expression of the faces, London seemed the city of tramps. The vestries were indiscriminately distributing bread sent to us by the French government. The ribs of a few horses showed dismally. Haggard special constables with white badges stood at the corners of every street. I saw little of the mischief wrought by the Martians until I reached Wellington Street, and there I saw red wheat clambering over the buttresses of Waterloo Bridge. At the corner of the bridge, too, I saw one of the common contrasts of that grotesque time. A sheet of paper flaunting against the thicket of the red wheat, transfixed by a stake that kept it in place. It was the placard of the first newspaper to resume publication, the Daily Mail. I bought a copy for a blackened shilling I found in my pocket. Most of it was blank, but the solitary compositor who did the thing had amused himself by making a grotesque scheme of the advertisement stereo on back page. The matter he printed was emotional. The news organization had not as yet found its way back. I learned nothing fresh except that already in 1 week the examinations of the Martian mechanisms had yielded astonishing results. Among other things, the article assured me that what I did not believe at the time, that the secret of flying was discovered. At Waterloo, I found the free trains that were taking people to their homes. The first rush was already over. There were few people in the train, and I was in no mood for casual conversation. I got a compartment to myself and sat with folded arms, looking gaily at the sunlit devastations that flowed past the windows. And just outside the terminus, the train jolted over temporary rails, and on either side of the railway the houses were blackened ruins. To Clapham Junction, the face of London was grimy with the powder of the black smoke, in spite of the 2 days of thunderstorms and rain. And at Clapham Junction the line had been wrecked again. There were hundreds of out-of-work clerks and shopmen working side by side with the customary navvies, and we were jolted over a hasty relaying. All down the line from there, the aspect of the country was gaunt and unfamiliar. Wimbledon had suffered. Walton, by the virtue of its unburnt pine woods, seemed at the least heard of any place along the line. The Wandle, the Mole, every little stream was a heap mass of red wheat, in appearance between butcher's meat and pickled cabbage. The Surrey pine woods were too dry, however, for the festoons of the red climber. Beyond Wimbledon, within line of sight, in certain nursery grounds were the heaped masses of earth about the 6-cylinder. A number of people were standing about it, and some sappers were busy in the midst of it. Over it flaunted a Union Jack, flapping cheerfully in the morning breeze. The nursery grounds were everywhere crimson with the wheat, a wide expanse of livid color cut with purple shadows, and very painful to the eye. One's gaze went with infinite relief from the scorched earths and sullen reds of the foreground to the blue-green softness of the eastward hills. The line on the London side of Woking Station was still undergoing repair, so I defended at Byfleet Station and took the road to Maybury, past the place where I and the artilleryman had talked to the hussars, and on by the spot where the Martian had appeared to me in the thunderstorm. Here, moved by curiosity, I turned aside to find, among a tangle of red fronds, the warped and broken dog cart with the whitened bones of the horse scattered and out. For a time I stood regarding these vestiges. Then I returned through the pinewood, neck high with red weed here and there, to find the landlord of the spotted dog had already found burial, and so came home past the College Arm. A man standing at the open cottage door greeted me by name as I passed. I looked at my house with a quick flash of hope that faded immediately. The door had been forced. It was unfastened, and was opening slowly as I approached. It slammed again. The curtains of my study fluttered out of the window from which I and the artilleryman watched the dawn, and no one had closed it since. The smashed bushes were just as I had left them nearly 4 weeks ago. I stumbled into the hall, and the house felt empty. The stair carpet was ruffled and discolored where I crouched, soaked to the skin from the thunderstorm the night of the catastrophe. Our muddy footprints I saw still went up the stairs. I followed them to my study, and found lying on my writing table still, with the selenite paperweight upon it, the sheet of work I had left on the afternoon on the opening of the cylinder. For a space I stood reading over my abandoned arguments. It was a paper on the probable civilization and probable development of moral ideas with the development of the civilizing process. and the last sentence was an opening of a prophecy. In about 200 years, I had written, we may expect. The sentence ended abruptly. I remembered my inability to fix my mind that morning. Scarcely a month had got by, and how I had broken off to get my daily chronicle from the newsboy. I remember how I went down to the garden gate as he came along, and how I had listened to his odd story of men from Mars. I came down and went into the dining room. There were the mutton and bread, both far gone now in decay, and a beer bottle overturned, just as I and the artilleryman had left them. My home was desolate. I perceived the folly of faint hope I had cherished so long, and then a strange thing occurred. "It is no use," said a voice. "The house is deserted. No one has been here these 10 days. Do not stay here to torment yourself. No one escaped but you." I was startled. Had I spoken my thought aloud? I turned and stepped, and the French window was open behind me. I made a step to it and stood looking out. And there, amazed, even as I stood, amazed and afraid, were my cousin and wife. My wife, white and tearless. She gave a faint cry. "I came," and she said, "I knew." And she put her hand to her throat, swayed. I made a step forward and caught her in my arms. That was a very bittersweet ending. Bittersweet chapter. So this concludes chapter 9. And for the last chapter, I guess we can just continue it straightforward because it's just 4 pages. So chapter 10, the epilogue. I cannot but regret now that I am concluding my story, how little I am able to contribute to the discussion of the many questions which are still unsettled. In one respect, I shall certainly provoke criticism. My particular province is the speculative philosophy. My knowledge of comparative physiology is confined to a book or two, but it seems to me that Carver's suggestions as to the reason of the rapid death of the Martians is so probable as to be regarded almost as a proven conclusion. I have assumed that in the body of my narrative. At any rate, in all the bodies of the Martians that were examined after the war, no bacteria except those already known as terrestrial species were found. That they did not bury any of their dead, and the reckless slaughter they perpetrated, point that also to an entire ignorance of the putrefactive process. But probable as this seems, it is by no means a proven conclusion. Neither is the composition of the black smoke known, which the Martians used with such deadly effect, and the generator of the heat ray remains a puzzle. The terrible disasters at the Ealing and South Kensington laboratories have disinclined analysis for further investigations on the latter. Spectrum analysis of the black powder points unmistakably to the presence of an unknown element with a brilliant group of 3 lines in the green, and it is possible that it combines with argon to form a compound which acts at once with a deadly effect upon some constituents in the blood. But such unproven speculations will scarcely be of interest to the general reader to whom the story is addressed. None of the brown scum that drifted down the Thames after the destruction of Shepperton was examined at the time, and now none is forthcoming. The results of an anatomical an examination of the Martians, so far as the prowling dogs had left such an examination possible, I had already given. But everyone is familiar with the magnificent and almost complete specimen in Spirits of the Natural History Museum, and the countless drawings that have been made from it. And beyond that, the interest of their physiology and structure is purely scientific. A question of graver and universal interest is the possibility of another attack from the Martians. I do not think that nearly enough attention is being given to this aspect of the matter. At present, the planet Mars is in conjunction, but with every return to opposition, I, for one, to anticipate the renewal of their adventure. In any case, we should be prepared. It seemed to me it should be possible to define the position of the gun from which the shots are discharged, to keep a sustained watch upon this part of the planet, and to anticipate the arrival of the next attack. In that case, the cylinder might be struck with dynamite or artillery before it was sufficiently cool enough for the Martians to emerge, or they might be butchered by means of guns so screwed as to screw open. It seemed to me that they lost a vast advantage in the failure of their first surprise. Possibly they see it in the same light. Lessing had advanced excellent reasons for supposing that the Martians had actually succeeded in effecting a landing on the planet Venus. 7 months ago, Venus and Mars were in alignment with the Sun. That is to say, Mars was in opposition from the point of view of an observer on Venus. Subsequently, a peculiar and luminous sinuous marking appeared on the unillumined half of the inner planet, and almost simultaneously a faint dark mark of a similar sinus character was detected upon a photograph of a Martian disk. One only needs to see the drawings of these appearances in order to fully appreciate their remarkable resemblance in character. At any rate, whether we expect another invasion or not, our views of the human future must be greatly modified by these events. We have learned now that we cannot regard this planet as being fenced in and a secure abiding place for man. We can never anticipate the unseen good or evil that may come upon us suddenly out of space. It may be that in the larger design of the universe, this invasion from Mars is not without its ultimate benefit for men. It has robbed us of... Oh, okay, my reading is like dying already. It has robbed us of that serene confidence in the future for which is the most fruitful source of decadence. That gifts to human science it has brought are enormous, and has done so much to promote the conception of the common weal of mankind. It may be that across the immensity of space the Martians have watched the fates of these pioneers of theirs and learned their lesson, and that on the planet of Venus they have found a secure settlement. Be that as it may, for many years yet there will certainly be no slight relaxation of the eager scrutiny of the Martian disk, and those fiery darts from the sky. The shooting stars will bring with them as they fall an unavoidable apprehensions to all sons of man. The broadening of men's views has resulted can scarcely be exaggerated. Before the cylinder fell, there was a general persuasion that through all the deep of space, no life existed beyond the petty surface of our minute sphere. Now we see further. If the Martians can reach Venus, there is no reason to suppose that the thing is impossible for men. And when the slow cooling of the sun makes this earth uninhabitable, as at last it must do, it may be that the thread of life that has begun here would have streamed out and caught our sister planet within its toils. And dim and wonderful is the vision I've conjured up in my line of life, spreading slowly from this little seedbed of the solar system, throughout the inanimate vastness of sidereal space. But that is a remote dream. It may be, on the other hand, that the destruction of the Martians is not only a reprieve. To them, and not to us, perhaps, is the future ordained. I must confess the stress and danger of the time had left an abiding sense of doubt and insecurity in my mind. I sit in my study writing by the lamplight, and suddenly I see again the healing valley below me set with riding flames, and I feel the house behind me and about me empty and desolate. I go out into Byfleet Road, and vehicles pass me, a butcher boy in a cart, a cab full of visitors, a workman on a bicycle, and children going to school, and suddenly they became vague and unreal, and I hurry again with an artillery man through the hot, brooding silence. Of a night, I see the black powder darkening the silent streets, and the contorted bodies shrouded in that layer. They rise upon me, tattered and dog-bitten. They gibber and grow fiercer, paler, uglier, mad distortions of humanity at last, and I wake cold and wretched in the darkness of the night. I go to London, and I see the busy multitudes in Fleet Street and the Strand, and it comes across to my mind there are but the ghosts of the past, haunting the streets I have seen silent and wretched, going to and fro, phantasms in the dead city, the mockery of life in a galvanized body. And strange too it is to stand on Primrose Hill, as I did but a day before writing this last chapter, to see the great provinces of houses, dim and blue through the haze of the smoke and mist, vanishing at last into the vague lower sky, to see the people walking to and fro among the flower beds on the hill, to see the sightseers about the Martian machine that stands there still, to hear the tumult of the playing children, and to recall the time where I saw it all bright and clear-cut, hard and silent, under the dawn of that last great day. And strangest of all is it to hold my wife's hand again, and to think that I have counted her as she has counted me among the dead. That's it. We're done. War of the Worlds is done. What a very sobering epilogue. It's a very bittersweet ending. No signs of development preparing for the cylinders to drop again. But other than that, I have to say, this is a very sobering book to read towards the end. Okay, give me a second, I will need to turn off the music. All right, there you go. Thank you everybody for joining me. I actually need to go and pee, because I need to talk about a few things first, because next year I want to try and do a pumping session as well. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Alright, with War of the Worlds concluded, I can safely say this has been a fun stream to do. Basically, all these reading streams is just basically something really fun for me to do, and I think definitely this will be a staple part of my stream schedule, because not only is this somewhat special for me, I don't know. Reading War of the Worlds is quite enlightening, and I hope you guys learned a lot. And now comes a time where I think after all these weeks, I would like to get your opinions on my reading and whatnot. Because while certainly I'm definitely gonna admit, I think somewhat throughout these weeks I have faltered in my terms of reading, because my reading voice is very, I don't know how you say it. It's very strange and a bit odd, I guess. So the last few weeks, I think my voice has been improving, but other than that, I don't know. It feels kind of tiring to just work with everything, I guess. And for that, I'm really glad that I managed to just sit through this entire journey. Because when I first started out the reading streams, I was not very sure whether I was gonna progress far in War of the Worlds or when I'm gonna drop it. But it turns out I just kind of kept pushing, and yeah, you guys are here. Anyway, I'm very happy that War of the Worlds is now over, and that means we can now push on to another book. The details of this book, I guess I can reveal next week, because I'm going to try and determine which is the best book to read. Because I don't want a book that's too long, or too short, or, you know, too crazy. I can do short stories, because they might help a little bit more. But yes, new books. I'm still leaning on Ender's Game, but if you guys want, there are other books I can read. Alistair Reynolds comes to mind, but yeah, other than that, all short stories or poems. But like my compatriot Hanero Momoko, who reads bedtime stories, I do have a purpose for these things. I don't want to make people sleep. I want to expose people to more literature that is out of context for our country. War of the Worlds, well, could be mandatory reading in Malaysia, but I feel like for all intents and purposes, being exposed to all these books, right, is very good for, you know, you guys. As much as I sound kind of pretentious, it's fun reading all these books, because these are books you normally wouldn't read if you were let's say going through your usual school struggles in English, or even your you know, your college. If you're not taking English course, you might not be exposed to this kind of books, so it'll be interesting. It's just very interesting to come up with ideas to just read all these books to you, and short stories basically. And in time, maybe I'll just diverge from you know, I'll diverge from science fiction, I guess. Then we can just do local short stories, because there are authors here who write in English and they are not recognized enough. So yes. And with that, I think that's it for the stream today. Wow, 2 hours 15 minutes just to finish up 40 pages. My throat is gone, like actually destroyed. Again, a big shout out to everybody who has stood by me for this reading stream journey, because again, you guys give me motivation to continue on with my readings and whatnot. And I don't know, reading and writing basically, because these are all things that normally you don't see VTubers do. Some of them do, but it's more like the sleeping ASMR thing. I just like to do it because it helps me practice teaching, and you know, opening up stuff for discussion. Like if you talk like Scottish Dylus destroy your throat. Actually, it does. This Scottish accent actually made my throat burn. It actually hurts like a bitch now. Oh lord. Anyway, at that part, I don't know. If you, I would like opinions though. If you guys really like the reading, please let me know, because I personally like the reading, and I'm not so sure. I mean, I try not to make I try not to make it so that people rule my opinions, but sometimes I'm just like, I don't feel like this workouts for some people, and I feel discouraged, but I just find the energy to just keep going no matter what, because eventually I'll find people who are just who are liking all this kind of stuff. And I want to prompt discussions with people sometimes, because I like talking to people, basically. Not the light kind of talking, but having a discussion about certain things, like War of the Worlds. Each of the chapter I review, right? Listen to your reading helps me work. Ah, that's nice. I mean, here and there, right? I feel I understand my reading is also a bit off sometimes, because I have a hard time reading, like processing the train of thought, and then some words that they don't come easily to my mouth, because I'm not very skilled at talking. At least when I'm skilled at talking, it's mostly just shouting, and I need to catch my breath, especially with all these long phrases. So I see this as like listening to audiobooks. Yeah, basically, yeah, it's like an audiobook. But I hope these reading streams can also help me improve my reading, because this is a rare thing. I don't usually read out books. Because I usually just speed read them, like I think weird person would do. But reading out these books makes you realize the extent of how much you can feel from a book. You put yourself in an imaginary world. In War of the Worlds, I have made it a very strong point to point out words I don't understand, or what I assume you might not understand. And War of the Worlds, right? And on all these chapters that stop, I'll just take the 5 minutes break that I take from reading. I'll spend it not on just like resting and whatnot. I actually kind of prompt up discussions on the current chapter. So characters like the curate and the artilleryman, in that short 5 minute span, or like 8 minute span, or how long, no matter how long the break is, I always try and break them down into characters that, although they might seem well-meaning or villainous, they're all are human underneath, and that is quite interesting, I guess. If you're a writer, understanding these books is actually key to moving forward in moving on as a writer. You understand how to develop themes, you understand how to pace a story, you understand how to create the imagination. It's not only a practice for other writers like you guys, but it's also a practice for me, because I still need to do a hell lot of work for my writing, which you can see next week. So yes, I see this stream not only as something I want to do, but something that can definitely benefit everybody, whether it is by helping you relax, exposing you to a new kind of literature, or you know, just giving attention, or if you just want to stay here and support me, yeah, that's all good. But in the end, yeah, I think the one thing I should try and do is just try and get more discussion, because I always feel like each chapter, even in some books like Ender's Game, right, each chapter has its own meaning and establishes a character and whatnot. And in War of the Worlds, in the chapters that are very sparse and whatnot, even the brief ones, they kind of expose a lot of Wells's anti-imperialistic viewpoints and whatnot, so we can see it happen there, and personally that's why I find it very interesting enough to bring up. So yes, I'm also as you can kind of tell, I'm practicing to be a teacher. Anyway, as the time of the stream, it is now 6 p.m. I will leave it up on Twitter to see whether you guys want to leave any criticisms for my rating, because I feel like there's more that you guys can type out if you're interested. So it'll be on Twitter, as you can see in my description? Well, whether it's in my description, I don't know. I'll just need to post on Twitter. But I would like to see more feedback on the reading streams, in case I need to definitely improve on some things, because I know pronunciation is one thing, and making it easier for Malaysian audiences to understand. So yeah. And with that, yeah, that's the end of this week's stream, and I will try and get the schedule up by Sunday as usual, now that I have extra time. And trust me, next week I try and get some stuff going on, okay? I want to make sure everyone has a fun time watching me, and new guys coming in can definitely enjoy themselves, no matter how much I go on ranting for. Basically, I'm happy that you guys have stuck with me for this long, for something as mundane as book reading, and it makes me very happy to be in there. I don't seek the big things. Even though I try and reach out to people that are bigger than me, it's usually because I like those bigger people personally and I don't feel forced to join them. Like, I may have plans for a collab with a big YouTuber, but that's because I want to and because I watch them and I really like their content. And also I don't know. But basically, when it comes to VTubing, for me personally, I think reading helps define that the reason why I like to VTube or stream in general, because I'm doing this for everybody that is interested and for myself. And if I don't appeal to the fan servicey side of VTubing, I can't do anything. I'm not built that way. I'm not built to be fan service. I'm built to be someone who likes to appeal to some kind of intellectual capacity. I'm sounding pretentious, but that's how I see it. It's somewhat like staying true to yourself. If we enjoy it, we enjoy it. Yeah. Bro, same. If you enjoy it and we enjoy it, we good. Yeah, Kate. That's why the writing stream and the reading stream is special for me, because unlike gaming stream, a gaming can appeal to everybody and it's something you can kind of see and enjoy. But reading and writing takes a special stream, and even art streams like pretentious bros. I don't know. It's from an older perspective, I guess. I like to help people. I like to challenge people sometimes, even though I don't challenge myself. But yeah, if I'm gonna bring out a book that I can read, it'll probably be something that has themes, strong themes, basically. If I want to write something, even a short story, it will have strong themes to it. And yeah, whether people like it or not, I'm not responsible for forcing people to like them. And yeah, again, thank you guys. Thank you so much for sticking with me all the way. A big shout out to my moderator for having my back. And you Artific, like, you shouted me out on your debut stream. I was just so just like, I always thought my the way I talk is a bit too sophisticated for people, but hearing you say that I'm down to earth is actually quite interesting, considering that I have the same down to earth capacity as a balloon. Anyway, yes, I think I should end the stream here because it's 8:04. I need to get ready to feed my animals as well as get ready for dinner. So I will catch you guys next week. The monk here foreshadowing for next week's Monday's campaign stream on Tuesday. And yeah, let's see what happens. And hopefully I can get a special collab going on in the coming weeks. Alright? I hope to grow. No, thanks for the stream. Yeah, thank you for coming. Thank you everybody for coming. I always appreciate everyone coming here, even if I can't express it properly. Alright, so glory be your evening, mercs, and you guys have a great time, okay? Stay safe, hydrate yourself, don't do Scottish voices until the roof of your throat is gone. Don't be like me. I'll find something easy to read. Alright, bye!